Imagine a place where the boundaries of age, industry, background, and culture melt away, replaced by a shared desire to explore the depths of our collective experiences. Here, on the open, shaded porch, amidst an atmosphere of serenity and tranquility, leaders from all walks of life gather to share their stories, the stories that shape their very beings and doings. This is the Knowledge Mindfulness Porch with Laila Maroof.
So welcome back to the Knowledge Mindfulness Porch and my continuing conversation with Seham AlHusaini. We've been talking about many facets of her life, including growing up in Kuwait during the Iraqi invasion, her educational pursuits at Columbia Business School and the University of Texas, and her return to the Middle East as the general manager of Deliveroo. Now, Seham, in part one, we touched about technology, but I want to dig a little deeper now.
Yeah.
How do you see exponential technology growth, the fast changing? Let's talk about AI in particular. Is it a threat or an opportunity to Seham?
I think AI is an incredible opportunity. I mean, personally, there's not a day that goes by that I don't, since the launch of ChatGPT 3.0, that I don't use AI in some way because I love to interact with the technology. I like to push and poke those buttons and understand the capability. I think it is a transformative technology. I think there's no denying. I think I am someone who really believes that in the next even few years, I mean, definitely 5-10, there will be a transformation in the way we do work, in the way we spend our time as people and move our time away from a lot of kind of tasks that can be automated to put our time and effort towards things that are more meaningful. I think it is going to change business. I think it's going to change the ways we work. I think it's going to change a lot of industries. And I'm very excited about it. I think it's going to help us do more and help us take, we all have a limited amount of hours per day and per week and, to work and be productive. If you have a tool that allows you to do what you do in 8 hours in 4, you've kind of just doubled the available headcount and brain power of everybody in the world. So I think I'm a big believer. And I've had debates with people about threat and the fear. And I think this is, of course, we have to regulate things the right way and make sure that the experts are weighing in on where the potential risks are. But I'm a very much an AI optimist. And I think it is probably the single biggest milestone in technology since the World Wide Web, in my opinion.
Right. Bill Gates says he's warning that people don't realize what's coming. Things like you said, I can see the opportunities, definitely, but I also can see the pros and cons of any technology, right? So you are excited, you see it as an opportunity, but I'd love to hear also if you look at the cons of such technology. You talked about guidelines from outside, external, whatever, the experts. What about internal guidelines? How to use that? I mean, you have employees, you lead teams.
I think it's the same as any technology. Even when you sign up to use an email, there's like terms and there's a policy around how to use your email. If you're using any kind of tool, as a company, you regulate, hey, what do you have to be careful of? If you're using AI to generate an email to a client, you got to make sure you read it. You need to make sure that it doesn't have biases. You need to make sure that it's not, misrepresenting information. So AI, I think, we need to be very pragmatic about how we interact with the technology to make sure that it is used in the right way. At the end of the day, it is not something that you can kind of set off on its own. There has to be the right level of human engagement and interaction with the technology to make sure that it is leveraged properly, that you're not crossing any lines. So I think that's like standard. And of course, every company does that and every company should do that. And I think you need the right training to be able to do it the right way. I just did a training at we have a Roo GPT tool where, we work with ChatGPT to have kind of our own internal tooling. So I think those things need to be regulated and managed. When I say external, I think I struggle to weigh in, me, I'm not an expert. I love to use AI, but I am not someone who really understands what's under the hood, the black box of like how the coding works and how this can get out of hand. So I can't weigh in, right, on like, is it safe? Is it not? And I hear a lot of people weighing in and saying, oh my God, it's a threat. But I haven't heard anybody who's saying that who really understands what they mean by a threat. I think it's more people imagining things like the Terminator movie. I don't know. But I think we need to leverage the experts of the world to say, what is the regulation here? What are the risks? What are the concerns? And take that in stride. But I don't believe, I guess, in kind of the panic around it. I think have the right people weigh in. Really, literally any technology can be misused or used to harm or, so I think the right regulations, the right thinking, the right expertise makes sense. But I do think it's an area where people, because it's so new and it's so unknown, you do see a lot of the phenomenon of like sensationalizing the threats. I can't say if that's real or not. So I choose to turn to people who really are the experts in the field.
I think I agree with you, and I align with what you're saying. But I also think of AI personally as something different from other technologies at the moment because of the bigger unknown. In terms of what? I think even the creators, even the coders who did the algorithms, I don't think they know the ultimate growth of something like this. I think I want to go back to a story I read a couple of days back about an incident that happened in 2013 with a scientist. He was trying to create an algorithm that can play the Nintendo. And what happened, he did not program something that happened then, which was what? The algorithm, while it was playing the game, imagine, it hit pause indefinitely. And why? Because it realized it doesn't want to lose. And that's a tactic. If it hit pause indefinitely, it won't lose. But he did not program that. He didn't know that was happening. So what I'm trying to say is maybe the price or the consequences of a technology like AI realizing its cons is much higher stake if we don't. You know what I'm saying? I feel that way, but that's my perception. I don't know, like you said, what is the fine line between, yes, it's a great technology, it's going to save a lot of time, a lot of, even it's going to change the landscape of the skills needed, the skills.
Yes.
If you were talking about MBA Colombia, maybe in 2-3 years, all the skill sets will be changed somehow of what we need, right?
Yeah. Well, one point I want to make about what you're saying, this example, that's a great example to embody kind of the unknown. I think you can have those things live side by side. A great technology which will save time, lives. I mean, I think there's medical applications for AI that literally will save lives and diagnosis. So you have this amazing technology that can be true, and at the same time, it can be true that there are uncertainties and there's unknowns that need to be regulated in the right way. And so I think we kind of now have to go into this age where we believe those two things at the same time. We don't necessarily stop using the technology or kind of put off, but we also don't use it without a lot of thinking and a lot of the right committees and regulatory bodies to make sure that, the unknown is kind of planned for and there are guardrails to make sure that we protect ourselves from the potential unknown, and all those scenarios are kind of played out. But I think to the point about jobs, I think as humans, you want to make sure that you are always doing the type of work that is the most fulfilling, that is the most difficult to replace. And in human history, that's what happens. As people go from factory jobs or, after the Industrial Revolution, everything changed. You have machinery. People adapt by, it's not a bad thing. They don't just, you lose your job, a machine took over. It's, hey, look, this job now can be automated. What are the skills you have and how can you apply them to engage with the machinery to be more productive or do something different? So for me, even if my skill sets if there's a threat to the skill sets I can offer, I think learning and adding to my knowledge and kind of developing myself and finding the right skills is the way I kind of de-risk or hedge against that happening. And I think a lot of people probably think
so.
Way.
If you want to hire talent now, what do you look for as a leader, Seham?
Look, I think I look for good problem solvers, right? I maybe if there's one thing I'm gonna kind of define when I'm hiring anybody, more than expertise, more than knowing a specific field, I look for people who can solve problems, because I think, especially in my line of work, I do a lot of strategy, a lot of kind of management across commercial functions, operations. It's easy to learn the business. It's easy to learn kind of what does this company do. I think the harder thing to learn and the thing that's more kind of ingrained is being a problem solver, having a mindset where you can take any given problem, any given challenge, and find a way to break it down and kind of get to a solution. So the number one thing I test for when I interview people across roles is that problem solving. And a bit of, I would say the other thing is range, like an ability to do a lot of different things. And I think there's been a lot of research and books more recently written about this idea that range is very valuable, having a range variety of skills, being able to be a bit of a jack of all trades. But in most interviews, there's a lot of things you look for, but that kind of ability, and you can kind of test this in people, you kind of throw a problem at them a little bit. And you want to get a sense of how their brain works. How do they break it down? How do they start to think about where to go and where to look? And those are my favorite types of people to work with and to hire, because people who have that mindset are so coachable, and they can learn anything, and they can grow, and they always want to develop they have like somewhat like a growth mindset. They're always open to learning. And so those people for me are, the people that inspire me, and I want them to be around me, and I want them to be kind of part of my team.
And how do you retain them? If you have this talent, how do you retain them as a leader? What is the culture that you think will keep them there, keep them loyal, give their best?
Yeah, I think it's really like with this question, I think it's really so many things. Like I think retaining and keeping people happy, I think at different stages of their journey, different things will retain them. Someone who's just joined and is very excited and ready to learn will want to stick around because they want to learn, and there's so many new things, and they're excited about it, and they're like a sponge and they're soaking it up. But then maybe they get into year one, they start to think about scope of work, and are they growing? Are they getting a bigger title? Or do they have room to grow beyond just the learning? So then that becomes kind of the retention. Do they have what they want? And then compensate. There's like multiple elements, I think. But if I had to say the biggest thing, at least for me, when I think of my own retention in companies where I was at, and now what I try to emulate is, are you working for someone that you look up to, that their values align with your values? Assuming you can accommodate all the other things that are important to people. If you work for someone that you respect, that you're like, okay, this person's values align with my values, and you learn from them and grow for them, I think you tend to stick around. Like I think people associate, people say you never leave a job, you leave a manager. Like when people leave a job, they tend to they don't want to work for this person anymore. I think being someone people want to work for, being someone with integrity, being someone that I think maybe gets you 50, 60% of the way. But there's a lot of times where people leave and you can't retain them. And it's things that you can't control, and things that, no matter how good your culture is, no matter how much of an opportunity you create for someone, is just the right time. So I try to do a lot to keep people, but I also sometimes know that it's time for someone to move on. So there comes a time when I don't think I always, retaining and keeping people for a long time is not the ultimate measure of success. Sometimes you need to know when you have a conversation with someone that as much as they're amazing, you love them, they're great, and you want to keep them, it's the right time for them to move on.
And it's great that you know that. I mean, to sense that even when it's the right time to go is also, I think, is a great skill to take forward, right?
Yeah. And I think as a manager or a leader, you have to, I was talking before about managing people and making sure that they're happy and comfortable. You have to recognize when there comes a point where you can't fulfill kind of what an individual wants across all the different parameters and the different things that matter to them. You can kind of sense it and you know it. And so for them to be happier and for you to be able to operate better, you have to acknowledge that there's a better opportunity for them, or it's the time for them to leave. And those are always really difficult moments, but
it's part of reality, right?
You have to face the reality.
Yes, we always have to face the reality. That's the thing. So what are the principles? What are the main principles? You talked about your role as really, really a big role in inspiring, in creating the culture, in managing, in functionality, and so many of all that. What is the guiding principles that you work on?
I think one of the things is like I really believe in leading with my core values and integrity. Like I like to, obviously there's a lot of principles that drive your day to day, how you manage, how you do things, but fundamentally, I always look back and I want to be aligned to the values that matter to me. So in whatever that might be, you face so many different things in any given day, whether it's dealing with people. So in an example, someone maybe in my team wants to leave or wants to say, how do I handle that? I believe in kind of looking back, what is the right thing to do? What are my core values, and how can I be honest with this person and put them before monetary importance, company performance? Like always looking back to kind of the integrity and values that I hold dear as a way to guide my decisions, because it's easy to when you're leading a company, it's easy to make decisions and lose sight of like your core principles and values as a person. I remember hearing like a podcast with the CEO of Airbnb, Brian Chesky, talking about how, they had a PR nightmare and they had to make decisions to handle the PR nightmare. And all his advisors and the comms team told him, they had an issue in an Airbnb where someone had a very bad experience and wrote on Twitter and created this fuss that basically they had a very poor experience, something bad happened to them. And everybody advised the CEO of Airbnb to like kill it, basically, like write a formal comms message, don't address it, like don't apologize, because apologizing would show weakness and apologizing would show that you acknowledge the mistake, which we don't want to acknowledge, and it's not good for the business. Like sometimes you feel you're in these positions where but then, and he followed them in the beginning, and then he ended up going, actually, this doesn't align with my values. So like I forget all the advice, forget the comms. I think we should apologize to this person. I think we should sincerely apologize for the issue they had, even if it does kind of put us at a bit of risk, and I really, that resonated so much with me, that like you're influenced by so many things, your profitability, your numbers, your growth, and it's easy to be kind of led astray and make the decisions purely based on those things. But sometimes, the fundamentals of when you're struggling, when you need to make tough decisions, you got to go back to kind of your principles and your values as a person, on how you treat people or how you treat customers, or how what the right thing to do is, and kind of come back to that.
Wouldn't you call that core human values? When you say, I go back, I really feel that so much, that empathy, compassion, care, kindness on one side of the spectrum, right? But these are global values. These are core human values that we cling to in times of, like you said now, right?
That's exactly what I mean. I do mean human values. Like my core, like I have so many leadership principles and how I think about strategy and problem solving, and those things are fine. And, I'm happy to talk about them. But core human values, I think it's important to kind of check in with that. And like, for me, that's probably one of the most important things to me when I'm really faced with tough decisions and tough things, like to be human, to really go back to what I value the most. Apart from that, I think you have different principles and ways of solving things and dealing with your day-to-day as a manager. But I believe in discipline. I believe in core values. But coming back to that, I think it's not easy to do. I think that's the thing. It's not always easy to forget everything else, to hear the noise and want to go back to that. A lot of times you have to ignore that voice and kind of do what you think is right outside of those principles.
I think it's the anchor in many ways, right? It's our anchor to kind of, reside to at one point in time. I don't know. That's what I feel sometimes.
I think you look at a lot of business leaders and people feel that they don't do that enough. Like people get caught up in the profits, the growth, the people, you can see it. We see it everywhere. Yeah. People kind of get caught up in that and they become like a bit robotic.
You were telling me just a minute ago about the competition, about, everyone is doing everything and how competitive it has become. Do you think it's time to rethink that economical model we're living in, that competition?
I don't think we have a choice. I think it's like a machine and khalas, it's gone. It's that momentum. It's unstoppable. Consumerism, desire, wanting things, like wanting more, is just this flywheel that's now like in full momentum. If you, for example, like you talk about competitiveness, and if you wanted to come into, let's say, the ride-hailing industry, you have an Uber, you have Lyft, you have all these companies, and consumers now are used to it, and it's meant that the taxi industry is a lot more competitive, and things are harder for taxi drivers. Companies like Uber and are doing everything they can to be profitable, and yet they're incentivizing customers. It's so hard to now pull that back and go back to the old way of the world, because consumers, quickly adopt things and they get used to them, and it makes their life easier. So it means companies like Uber will exist and continue to thrive. It means more companies will want to build and compete with that. And so it's kind of like this momentum that you can't stop. Same with food delivery. It's like you can't go back and take it away now that consumers have had a taste of, no pun intended, but like I've had a taste of that like ease of life. And so I think that consumerism and the desire, the way consumers kind of latch on to all of these different offerings, whatever they might be.
Not even small changes, not even to, small tweaks, small changes. because the gap, the inequality gap is getting larger and bigger and bigger. I mean, it's like these huge companies are taking over, right? Like you're saying, but what's the end of this? Where are we heading?
That's a different, I mean, as a philosophical argument, I think outside of the realities of how like the market works. And yeah, of course, I mean, I think we've gotten into a world where shareholders and are the most important thing. And that's kind of the engine, the corporate engine. For sure, I think it could be re-examined, that there's so many things that we would all, it's not ideal. But I think the problem with that is, like I said, it's kind of like, it's almost impossible to turn it around or change it. It's literally like a train. And now where do you start if who is even like, there is no individual, even if you brought everybody to the table, and we see it in so many things that people try to collaborate over, like climate change or trying, you bring everybody to the table. It's almost like a game of chicken. No one wants to be the one to volunteer. Oh, I'll slow down or I'll do it. And so to synchronize the slowdown of something like this, I think is so difficult. But in principle, like philosophically, and I love kind of those ideas. Of course, like I think it's like we've gotten to a point where the gaps.
I think it needs collective effort. Just what you said, it's collective. It's all together. We're all doing this together, because when you say we bring people in for like climate change, we're just bringing who? Are we bringing the social scientists? Are we bringing the consumers? Are we bringing the younger? Thinking of that in a much wider way, where you're bringing in interdisciplinary kind of approach to all this, a more collective, integrative approach to everything. Because the problems, you were talking about problem solving, I see problems are really complex now. And no one person, even with the smartest person on earth, can solve these problems alone anymore. So that collective wisdom, the collective, approach, let's say, to things, I don't know, I just see things are getting, with all this noise, Seham, stress is kind of the biggest issue right now, right? Stress, like you said, mental health, mental issues. How do you deal as a leader personally with stress? What do you do? What's your techniques?
I'm a big believer. I'm obsessed with building good habits. Like I'm someone who I'm very disciplined in that sense. Like I like to, you can't alleviate something like stress. I lived with all high stress since maybe the time I entered college, like these high stress environments. There's no silver bullet, but I am a big believer in building habits over time and building very, very good habits. I'm almost obsessed with that. Like, whether it's building a habit to meditate every morning, or building a habit to get up early in the morning to have kind of time to myself, to just have a little bit of alone time, building really good habits about going to the gym and kind of being very methodical about it. Building habits. I mean, I write a gratitude journal every night to make sure that like I'm bringing myself back to what I'm grateful for. So I'm really into like picking habits, picking things that I think help me manage my mind, my mindfulness, my kind of centeredness, and then doing them consistently and being, not giving up on them. So I think I've over the last, 10 years or so, but even more recently, built these like ingrained habits that I always follow, and they keep me centered. And I read a lot about I'm a big, I love Stoic philosophy and like Marcus Aurelius and these philosophers. And I love to read and remind myself about these principles and have them as kind of a daily part of my life. And I think those are what kept me sane.
How about breaking habits? Something that you have used, let's say, for the last 10 years, but it's not working anymore.
Yeah, no, I think it's both go hand in hand, like forming new good habits and breaking bad older habits. You know what I mean? I think I do a bit of both. Maybe I talk about building habits, but yeah, I also, I'm quite good at breaking habits that I think are not serving me, whether it's, waking up a little bit later. I built a bit of a habit of that in COVID. How do I reverse that? So breaking habits that I think no longer serve me, or kind of letting them wash away. Maybe I'm not as consciously as building the newer habits, but yeah, I think you got to reflect and say, like, I think there's like a conscious effort of stopping regularly. I do this, and how do I spend my time? What are the things I'm doing? Breaking habits. What are the relationships I've invested in? Which ones do I want to continue investing in? Which ones which friendships and relationships are not, meaningful or not,
Yes.
and how do I consciously, let's say, end those? Like, I do a lot of that reflecting to make sure that I continue doing the things I believe make sense. And I actively kind of stop the things that I think don't make sense.
It's amazing. When is your time of reflection and how do you do it?
I think the very early morning and the very late night. So in the early morning, because that's my time to meditate and do a bit of breath work. That's like, sometimes I'll like write my thoughts down. And then the end of the night when I'm doing like my gratitude, my journaling on like what I'm grateful for. So those are like the start of the day and the end of the day are kind of the milestones for me, or the markers of when I really try to be mindful. But if I do it well, I hope that like that morning trigger and the evening trigger means that throughout the day, I'm kind of reflecting and being mindful. And it's not just something I stop and do. It's kind of something that happens in my mind all the time. I mean, that's the goal. I think with kind of these habits that I've built around morning and evening, it's ingrained a more mindful kind of every hour of my day. There's something going on where I'm trying to center myself.
That's amazing. That's really, really great, Seham. Reflecting on something you said earlier about the work-life integration and having that balance. So this is something that is so much now I'm feeling going forward in my life. I was so much like, I check boxes, objectives, go for it, 1, 2, 3, and you check boxes. And then you realize, no, this is not fulfilling enough. How do we do this? How do you do this work-life integration in a way that can fulfill you and also fulfill your ambitions?
The main thing is like drawing lines in my life. Like, and so there's two ways to kind of separate and make sure you have a balance. One is your time, like making sure that I don't work till 9, 10 at night and like stay in the office all day. That's kind of easier to draw the line and say, look, every day at 6:30, I need to leave because there's other parts of my life that I need to pay attention to. And that's kind of easy. You just leave the office. The second thing you need to do is make sure that you switch off your brain so that your mind is not consumed with kind of work. And that's harder to do. You have to like, again, build a habit and train yourself. I think one of the habits I built is every time I think about work, when I'm not at work, I try to do a crossword puzzle, like a little mini, because it like cuts that thinking, it distracts you. And so like I try to build the habit of like, okay, stop, don't think about work. So like drawing physical boundaries, time boundaries, mind boundaries is the way that I try to manage it. It's an ongoing battle of like, how do you separate your life? And then, I mean, there's so many meaningful things in our lives, right? Like that we take for granted that you just need to pay a bit of attention to. My family, my parents, for example, I spent so much time away in New York working in business school, and I made a conscious decision that I want to be closer. I want to spend time with them. So, and when I do that now, I just try to really be in the moment and give it as much attention as when I'm at work and I'm paying attention to a meeting. If I'm talking to my mom on the phone and I catch myself being distracted, I'm like, hey, this is like as important, like you need to be paying full attention. This is like the most valuable parts of your life or your relationships, your family, the people you care about. So I try to apply the same level of like rigor and importance to that phone call as I would a meeting with, let's say, the CEO of the company when I'm like paying full attention. So I kind of draw those boundaries and remind myself of the importance of the things that are mundane, which are really the most fulfilling. The time with your family, the time with your parents, the time with the people you care about. Those are so fulfilling and meaningful that I don't even need to search beyond it. And the things that matter also are kind of the things, let's say, you write your gratitude journal at night. Those immediately, like what you write down, you start to realize those are the things that are fulfilling and meaningful. And so you kind of subconsciously focus on them more. But you got to draw lines. I think with work, it's like, it's easy to get sucked in.
God, Seham, kind of you reflect what I call a knowledge mindful leader in so many ways. And hopefully when you read the book, you will recognize yourself in the book in many of the techniques, many of the things we talk about is like, wow, I can see it reflected in what you're saying, what you're doing, and all that, because it all starts with a conscious, really realization that evolving your knowledge is number one. It's the oxygen, like, that we breathe nowadays. Going to the future, there's no two way about it, right?
Yeah, I think being aware and being very, accepting that you don't know everything and you're always growing and learning is such an important thing, and like probably a fundamental principle that allows you to always evolve and improve. Otherwise, you get a bit stuck.
I want you to leave with one advice. If you want to give one advice to the listener, the younger leader, let's say.
I think two things come to mind. I mean, one piece of advice is the importance of discipline and like showing up and doing the work. I think there's so much advice, there's so many things you can do and be inspired and be smart, and people are that. But I think the low-hanging fruit that I think sometimes I see people miss is just discipline and showing up, and how far that can get you, whether it's kind of showing up on time, doing the work, like it gets you so far and it helps you build so much experience that takes you further in your career than you think. You can learn, you can go to good schools, you can read a million books and those things. Obviously learning is so important, but the just showing up and having the discipline to do work and get things done, and I think is so underrated. It took me a long time to get better at that. Had I done it earlier, I think it would have helped me build that muscle earlier in my career.
Wow, that's a great, great advice, especially that younger generations, we hear them saying, work smart, but not hard in many ways going on.
No, you work hard, really. Working hard pays off, and working hard gets you far and helps you. It's discipline and the ability to like put your, just do the work, get it done. Yeah, like there's no shortcuts.
I mean, from your experience, that's what you're saying, right? And experience really says a lot. That's the thing. I know, my God. I can't thank you enough, Seham. Really, really, it was a pleasure. It was so informative. I learned so much from you today.
The pleasure's all mine. I'm really looking forward to reading your book. I can't wait. I think it's going to be awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. And that brings us to the end of this week's Knowledge Mindfulness Porch. I hope you enjoyed the show. And if you did, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any new episodes. If you have the time, we'd really appreciate if you leave us a review so other amazing individuals like you can find us. Thanks for listening.
You have been listening to the Knowledge Mindfulness Porch with Laila Marouf. If you want to join the movement of knowledge mindfulness and shape the world of tomorrow, go to drlailamarouf.com. The Knowledge Mindfulness Porch is a production of Forbes Books.